They told you motivation was supposed to feel good, that it would arrive like a clean rush of inspiration, lift you up, and gently guide you toward a better life. They told you it would feel positive, warm, and encouraging, something that made you smile and believe everything would work out in the end. But if that were true, you wouldn't still be stuck in the same place, listening to this, wondering why nothing has truly changed yet. You wouldn't be searching for something deeper, something real, something that actually works when life stops being kind. The truth most people avoid is this: the emotions that actually move human beings are rarely the polite ones. The forces that reshape lives don't always come from hope or optimism. More often, they rise from frustration, from fear, from a bruised sense of pride. They come from moments when you feel underestimated, moments when you imagine a future you can't accept, moments when your ego quietly whispers that you were meant for more than this. What if the reason you haven't transformed yet isn't because you lack motivation, but because you've been trying to use the wrong kind? What if the fuel that could change everything for you has been sitting inside you all along, quietly ignored, because no one ever told you it was acceptable to use it? Tonight, we are going to explore the dark side of motivation, spite, fear, and ego, not as weaknesses, but as raw, volatile energy. Dangerous if left unchecked, destructive if misunderstood, but unbelievably powerful if mastered. This is not a feel-good talk designed to make you comfortable. This is a long, honest conversation about what actually drives people to change when inspiration fades. And if you stay with me until the end, you may never look at your so-called negative emotions the same way again. Before we go any further, please like and subscribe to the channel so as to stay updated with content of this nature. You also need to understand that the Driven Mindset channel is not here to comfort you with empty reassurance. It is not here to tell you that everything will magically fall into place if you just believe hard enough. And it is definitely not here to sell you positivity as a replacement for discipline. This audiobook exists for one reason only: to make you stronger by telling you the truth most people are too afraid to say out loud. Real growth is uncomfortable. It feels abrasive. It challenges your self-image and forces you to confront parts of yourself you would rather ignore. Change is not gentle to the old version of you. It dismantles routines, habits, and excuses you once depended on for emotional safety. That's why most people avoid it. Not because they are incapable, but because they are uncomfortable with the emotions required to begin. You've been told your whole life to stay positive, to visualize success, to block out negativity, and to surround yourself with good vibes only. And for a while, that advice may have helped. It may have given you short bursts of energy or moments of optimism. But positivity has a shelf life. Life tests you. You fail. You get ignored. You get rejected. You watch opportunities pass you by. You see other people achieve things you secretly believe you were capable of achieving yourself. And eventually, positivity alone feels thin and fragile. This audiobook explores one single idea in depth: how emotions we label as dark, spite, fear, and ego can become powerful tools for long-term discipline and growth when handled correctly. We will move slowly, deliberately, and honestly, breaking this idea into parts, each one building on the last. By the end, you won't be looking for motivation anymore. You'll understand how to command it. Now let's begin with part 1. The lie we were taught about motivation from an early age. You were taught a comforting lie about how change happens. You were taught that motivation comes first and action follows. That if you could just feel inspired enough, energized enough, confident enough, everything else would fall into place naturally. This idea sounds harmless, even encouraging, but it quietly sabotages more lives than almost any other belief. If motivation truly worked that way, most people would already be living the lives they want. Gyms wouldn't be packed for a few weeks every year and empty the rest of the time. Books wouldn't be half-read. Dreams wouldn't slowly fade into hobbies and then into distant memories. The truth is, motivation is unreliable. Feelings change. Energy fluctuates. Life interferes. Think about the moments in your life when you actually changed something meaningful. Not the moments when you felt excited or hopeful, but the moments when you felt trapped. When staying the same became unbearable. When something inside you said, quietly but firmly, "I can't live like this anymore." Real change almost always begins with dissatisfaction. Negative emotions are not mistakes in human design. They are signals. Spite signals that you've been underestimated or dismissed. Fear signals that time is passing and opportunities are closing. Ego signals that your current reality does not match your internal sense of potential. When society teaches you to suppress these emotions instead of understanding them, it removes urgency from your life. And without urgency, there is no movement. These emotions do not ask politely. They apply pressure. They create friction. And friction, when applied correctly, produces motion. The mistake most people make is assuming these emotions must either be eliminated or indulged completely. Mastery lives in control, not denial. And the first of these dark fuels that most people encounter on their path is spite. Part 2. Spite. The fire lit by being underestimated. Spite has an ugly reputation, and that reputation is not entirely undeserved. Left unchecked, it can make people bitter, defensive, and small. But spite itself is not the problem. Like fire, it depends entirely on how it is used. Strip away the moral labels, and spite is simply refusal. Refusal to accept someone else's limited view of who you are and what you are capable of becoming. Spite is rarely born in dramatic confrontations. It doesn't usually come from open insults or loud rejection. More often, it is formed in quiet moments that linger far longer than words ever could. It's the look someone gives you when you share an idea they don't believe in. It's the way conversations change when your ambition no longer fits comfortably into the group. It's the absence of encouragement, the polite nods, the subtle shift where you realize people have stopped taking you seriously. No one needs to say, "You won't make it," for you to feel it. You sense it in how quickly the subject is changed, in how advice replaces belief, in how support turns conditional. At first, this realization hurts. It feels like rejection. But if you pay close attention, something else happens alongside that pain. Something sharpens. Something inside you becomes alert. That tightening in your chest, that quiet irritation, that restless energy, this is awareness being born. It is the moment you realize that the version of you people see is smaller than the version of you feel trying to emerge. And while that gap is uncomfortable, it is also powerful. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Spite, when controlled, creates focus. It cuts through noise. Suddenly you are less interested in explaining yourself. Less interested in convincing anyone. Less interested in being understood. You realize that explanations drain energy, while action multiplies it. This is where many people make a subtle but critical shift. They stop talking about what they are going to do, and they start building quietly instead. Silence becomes strategic, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of preparation. You wake up earlier. You stay later. You practice when no one is watching. You work on yourself in ways that don't earn applause. And for the first time, effort feels personal, not performative, not for validation, just necessary. Many highly disciplined people did not begin their journeys with confidence or support. They began with a chip on their shoulder. They remember the teachers who underestimated them, the friends who didn't believe, the family members who tried to talk them out of their ambition. And rather than letting that memory turn into resentment, they turned it into structure. Every repetition, every early morning, every uncomfortable choice became a quiet answer. Spite teaches you patience. It forces you to delay gratification because you are no longer interested in short-term recognition. You begin to understand that the most powerful response is time, combined with consistency. You don't need to announce progress when you are becoming it. But this is where discipline matters, because spite has a shadow side. If you let it run unchecked, it will harden you. It can make you reactive, obsessed with comparison, addicted to proving others wrong. And the danger here is subtle. When your entire identity is built on opposition, your sense of self depends on resistance. Ask yourself honestly, what happens when the people who doubted you disappear? What happens when you succeed quietly and there is no one left to prove wrong? Many people stall here. They reach a milestone, silence their critics, and then feel strangely empty. The fire that once drove them no longer burns the same way. This is why spite must be understood as ignition, not the engine. Its purpose is to start movement, not sustain it forever. It is the spark that pushes you out of complacency and into effort. But if you try to live on it indefinitely, it will exhaust you. The disciplined individual learns to extract value from spite without becoming owned by it. They acknowledge it, use it to establish momentum, and then gradually shift towards something more stable. They stop asking, "Who am I proving wrong?" and begin asking, "Who am I becoming?" This transition is critical, because growth cannot be sustained by opposition alone. Eventually, your motivation must move inward. And as the initial fire of spite cools, another force quietly takes its place, one that is less aggressive, but far more sobering. Fear. Part 3. Fear. The pain of staying the same. Fear is one of the most misunderstood forces in human psychology, largely because most people only encounter it in its most chaotic form. Panic, anxiety, hesitation. These are the versions of fear that get talked about. But beneath those surface reactions lies a quieter, heavier kind of fear, one that doesn't shout or rush. This fear waits patiently. It watches. And when you finally allow yourself to feel it, it becomes impossible to ignore. This is not the fear of failing once or twice. That kind of fear is sharp but brief. The deeper fear, the one that changes lives, is the fear of remaining the same. It is the realization that time is moving forward whether you act or not, and that inaction is itself a decision with consequences. This fear doesn't ask dramatic questions. It asks ordinary ones, which is what makes it so unsettling. What does your life look like if nothing changes? Not next week, not next month, 5 years from now, 10. You imagine the same routines, the same frustrations, the same quiet disappointments repeating themselves day after day. You imagine waking up older, not wiser, wondering where the years went and why your potential was never fully used. This is the fear most people run from because it forces them to confront responsibility. Fear strips away comforting lies. It makes excuses sound hollow. When you truly sit with it, distractions lose their appeal. The temporary comfort of procrastination, entertainment, or avoidance begins to feel expensive. You start to see the hidden cost behind every moment of comfort, and that cost is paid in regret. Disciplined people do not eliminate fear. They redefine it. They stop seeing fear as something to escape and start using it as information. Fear shows them what matters. It clarifies priorities. It draws a sharp line between what is important and what is merely convenient. There is a moment, often quiet and deeply personal, when fear shifts from paralysis to pressure. Instead of freezing you, it begins to organize you. You realize that effort is no longer optional. That waiting is more dangerous than failing. That even imperfect action is safer than stagnation. This is where many people experience a profound internal shift. They stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What if I never try?" That question carries weight. It lingers. It follows you into quiet moments. And once it takes hold, it becomes difficult to return to complacency. Fear also has a way of collapsing time. It reminds you that life does not offer unlimited retries. That youth fades. Energy changes. Opportunities narrow. This is not meant to create panic, but urgency. Disciplined urgency. The kind that makes you choose preparation over distraction and consistency over comfort. However, fear has a boundary. If you live inside it too long, it turns corrosive. It becomes anxiety. It drains rather than directs. It keeps you reactive instead of deliberate. This is why fear cannot be a permanent source of motivation. Its purpose is to wake you up, not to keep you awake forever. When fear has done its job, when it has forced honesty, clarified stakes, and initiated action, it naturally begins to transform. The constant tension eases, replaced by something quieter and more stable. You begin to act not because you are afraid of the future, but because you are committed to a standard. And that transition marks the emergence of the next force. A force less about avoidance and more about alignment. Less about what you fear losing and more about who you refuse to remain. Ego. Part 4. Ego. The identity that refuses to stay small. Ego is one of the most misunderstood forces in personal growth, largely because it has been confused with arrogance, vanity, and loud self-importance. But the kind of ego that sustains discipline is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It operates internally, shaping how you see yourself and what you are willing to tolerate from your own behavior. At its core, healthy ego is identity. It is the internal standard you hold yourself to when no one is watching. It is the sense that there is a gap between who you are today and who you are capable of becoming, and the refusal to ignore that gap any longer. Ego is not about believing you are better than others. It is about believing you owe more to yourself. This is where motivation changes form completely. In the early stages of growth, action is driven by emotion. You move because you are angry, afraid, or desperate for change. But as discipline begins to take shape, ego steps in and stabilizes the process. You no longer ask yourself how you feel before acting. You ask whether your actions align with the person you are becoming. This shift is subtle but profound. Laziness stops feeling comfortable. Procrastination no longer feels harmless. Skipping commitments doesn't feel like rest. It feels like a violation. Not because someone else is judging you, but because you are. Your ego begins to enforce standards quietly, consistently, and without negotiation. Healthy ego is built through evidence. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens it. Every uncomfortable choice reinforces your self-image. You begin to trust yourself because you have proof that you follow through. This is why true confidence is calm. It doesn't need hype or affirmation. It is grounded in experience. But ego must be earned. Imagined ego, the kind built on fantasy rather than effort, collapses under pressure. It creates entitlement without discipline, confidence without competence. Earned ego, on the other hand, becomes armor. It protects you from distraction, comparison, and external validation. As ego solidifies, something important happens. Your focus shifts from proving others wrong to proving yourself right. The opinions of others lose their power. Praise no longer excites you, and criticism no longer destabilizes you. You are no longer chasing approval. You are protecting alignment. This is also where consistency becomes sustainable. You no longer rely on emotional highs to show up. You show up because that is what someone like you does. Identity replaces motivation. Routine replaces emotion. Discipline becomes automatic. However, ego still requires discipline to remain healthy. If it inflates without continued effort, it becomes fragile. It turns defensive. It resists feedback. This is why the disciplined individual remains humble in action, even while holding high internal standards. They understand that ego is maintained through repetition, not declaration. Spite may have lit the fire, and fear may have kept you alert, but ego is what allows you to carry the weight of consistency without burning out. It is the bridge between emotional motivation and sustainable discipline. And once ego is established, once identity is aligned with action, there is only one step left. The transition from emotion-driven effort to emotion-independent execution. That transition is mastery. Part 5. Mastery. Using dark fuel without self-destruction. The purpose of dark motivation is movement, not permanence. Spite gets you started. Fear keeps you awake. Ego keeps you consistent. But discipline is what replaces emotion altogether. Discipline is what allows you to act regardless of mood, energy, or circumstance. When discipline is in place, motivation becomes optional. You no longer negotiate with yourself. You no longer wait to feel ready. You act because that is who you are. This is the point where effort becomes routine and growth becomes inevitable. The dark side of motivation is a teacher, not a home. If you live in anger, fear, or obsession, it will eventually consume you. But if you listen to what these emotions are trying to tell you, they will push you into motion and then fade into the background. The strongest people are not driven by constant emotion. They are driven by identity, structure, and standards. They use emotion to build systems, and then they rely on systems to carry them forward. Final reflection. The quiet power you now understand. You don't need to erase the darker emotions inside you. You don't need to pretend to be positive all the time. You don't need to wait for inspiration to strike. You need to understand yourself honestly and use what you already have. Spite, fear, and ego are not flaws. They are tools, and now you know how to use them without letting them use you. Sit with this understanding. Let it change how you see yourself. And when you're ready, act not loudly, not for applause, but quietly and relentlessly. If this Driven Mindset channel resonated with you, consider supporting the channel by liking the video or subscribing for more long-form motivation and mindset content. Until next time, stay disciplined.